about ready to get started. I would like to welcome everyone today. Today's webinar is about internet security and data breaches. It's with our very special guest, that's MacKeeper Security Researcher Chris Vickery. We expect today's presentation to last about 40 minutes, could go as long as 60 with a question and answer session after the webinar. As you guys may have known, Chris has discovered some pretty big leaks that have affected the personal data or sensitive information of millions of people around the world. His findings have been covered by the likes of Forbes, BBC, many others. I would like to thank everybody today for joining our webinar, sponsored by MacKeeper. Please welcome MacKeeper Security Researcher, Chris Vickery. Chris, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you for attending, everybody. Jeremiah, I want to say right now that I'm not seeing the PowerPoint up yet. Is it supposed to be up?
Hold on just a moment. Let's get that.
Okay.
And okay. Can you guys see that?
I'm not seeing it still.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. I can see now.
Perfect.
Okay, so we're good to go. Like I said, thank you everybody for showing up today. This is going to be mostly about stories from my adventures in the world of data breaches, security, and privacy. Like he said, I've found data breaches affecting millions of end users, dozens of companies, all the way from nonprofits to large corporations like Microsoft and Verizon and such. So let's get started. So, who am I? My name is Chris Vickery. I'm a 31-year-old native of Austin, Texas. During the day, I work as IT support at a decent-sized law firm here in Austin. But at night, I like to think of myself as sort of a data breach hunter. I'm also a security and privacy enthusiast. Personally, I'm a little bashful, and I'm a little feel weird saying, oh, I'm a security expert or whatever, but I've been cited as a security expert by Forbes, the New York Times, BBC, Wired, CNET, and dozens of other publications. Just recently, about a week ago, I received the Patient Privacy Rights 2016 Top Data Detective Award. That's a nonprofit group that advocates for patient privacy rights. They liked some of the HIPAA breaches that I found, and decided to honor me with that award. So I'm very thankful for that. Okay, so it's experimentation time. I decided that I would run something very interesting with this webinar, and here's what it is. I've discovered what appears to be my first repeat offender of data breaches that I found. It looks like Topps, the baseball card company, has again, some exposed data out on the internet. They have iPhone apps, not just iPhone there for Android and other phones, but they have phone apps called Kick, Huddle, and Bunt that people can download and trade cards and talk about baseball cards and trade things back and forth. And I found hundreds of thousands of what appear to be end-user app account details. We're talking about hash passwords, email addresses, usernames, things of that nature, stuff that shouldn't be viewable by the public. I'm assuming it belongs to Topps. I can't say for sure right now because they've ignored my breach notification. I sent it to them at the beginning of last week. They've had a whole work week. I got an automated response back from them saying, oh, we've received your message, we'll get to it. But seeing as there are potentially hundreds of thousands of end-user account details exposed right now, I thought I would take a more proactive approach than just waiting on something that they may never respond to. So here's today's challenge. Let's see if we can get this database secured by the end of this presentation. So if anybody in the audience has a good way to contact Topps, please do so and ask them to check their database permissions. It may be a backup database. A lot of the accounts look like they were created in 2013, so this may be something they're holding on to that they don't realize is exposed. But if you could get in contact with Topps, if you've got an internal connection or something with them or one of their database administrators, get them to send me an email at cvickery@cromtech.com, and I can shoot some more details their way, or maybe they'll just know which server we're talking about. All right, let's see if we can get that done. So what have I found? Here are some highlights. I discovered most famously the U.S. voter registration database that was 191 million records of what appears to be all registered voters in the United States. We'll talk more about that later. I've found the Mexican voter registration database that the database had 93 million records, although there were probably only 87 million unique records. Those are strictly confidential under Mexican law. We'll talk about that more eventually. Systema Software's Migration Archive Server, that was an Amazon AWS bucket that I found that had over 1.5 million health records and over 1 million social security numbers. I found the Hello Kitty fan account database with 3.3 million accounts. I found a database for an escrow firm company with over $3,500,000 in dispersible funds just waiting in accounts. Also, there was an unprotected database for the Council on American Islamic Relations donors. It included thousands of plain text credit card details. I believe that was a third party that they worked with that was ultimately responsible. But again, we'll talk more about that one in a little bit. And then one of the more interesting open databases that I found involved a third party that works with Microsoft, handling Microsoft's mobile careers website. Basically, you could. I found that it was a writable database, so that if anybody was to change the HTML within the database, it would, feed different HTML of your choosing arbitrarily to anybody that browsed the mobile site. So it's a potential watering hole attack, whereas anybody that fits the category of somebody looking at Microsoft jobs would be a target of that attack. And that's potentially, some very valuable targets. Okay, how did I get started? This is a little bit of a silly story, kind of what spurred my initial interest into security and privacy. But back in the summer of 2009, it was about 2:30 a.m. I was up late playing video games or something. From inside my house, I witnessed a City of Austin utility truck pull up behind my parked car on the side street. There was one driver and one passenger. The passenger got out of the vehicle, crawled under my car. I went to the garage for a closer look because I was curious why somebody was crawling under my car at 2:30 a.m. The driver spotted me through the garage window. I ran back inside to get my cell phone, start taking pictures. This was back in the day of flip phones. The truck got away before I could start taking pictures. Now, obviously, the guy had crawled out of my car and gotten from under my car and gotten back in. So paranoia kicked in within my head. I thought, why the heck is somebody trying to do something to my car at 2:30 a.m. in what appears to be, a government-owned vehicle, being their method of getting there? And it occurred to me that I had been an ACLU volunteer, and we had sued the government for some things. And so the only connection I can make in my head is, okay, is the Department of Homeland Security trying to keep tabs on me simply because I was part of an organization that sued them? That was the only thing that I could come up with in my head, and it just started me thinking in all sorts of different crazy ways. So I started researching online privacy, computer security, eavesdropping techniques, whatever, mostly to protect myself. About 6 years later, which is mid-2015, I've had plenty of time to calm down since then, but I've gained a lot of knowledge because it became a hobby of mine to look into computer security issues. But in mid-2015, I'm working at the IT department at my law firm. Then just serendipity kicks in. The random kind of fate kind of just kicked me right in the behind, and I unintentionally started finding third-party data breaches almost daily. Here's an example. The Texas Education Agency's website malfunctioned. They were using a Google search device appliance, and it had gotten misconfigured or something. So I ended up kind of looking for what I was looking for on their site by typing in some different URLs and fiddling around with parameter numbers, and I stumbled upon hundreds of education-related job applications: names, addresses, phone numbers, work histories, references, cover letters, college transcripts, stuff that they don't want out there, obviously. And when I notified the TEA, it was late on a Friday afternoon, so I'm sure I ruined the system administrator's weekend. He said he had to call in people and get it taken care of immediately. And here's the next, well, first real big find that I had after I started finding little breaches here and there just unintentionally. I was looking through Amazon AWS buckets that are open and exposed to the public. An AWS bucket is an example is example.s3.amazonaws.com. The S3 to .com part is always the same, but the example portion changes. You can make a bucket that says, mybucket.s3.amazonaws.com. And these can be configured for public access. Not that you should do that. There are some legitimate reasons why you would, but you really should not. And some companies do out of convenience sake, but they don't realize that people can find them. And one example that I stumbled upon was a very simple one. It was SYS-PROD, and then the Amazon, finished it off. And here's what happened. When I found the sys-prod, I ended up finding the unsecured medical info of 1.5 million people. It was the Systema breach. Systema software makes database SIMS data databases, and apparently ingests data from their clients into this database software for them. The files that I found belong to Systema and included the state of Kansas workers' compensation database. That was about 1 million entries. The California State Association of Counties Excess Insurance Authority, Miller's Mutual Group, York Insurance, Salt Lake County, those totaled about 500,000 entries. There were things like social security numbers, dates of birth, phone numbers, employer information, medical history, diagnoses, and investigatory notes from the insurance side, as in how they were going to approach paying certain claims or what legal arguments they were going to make to try to not pay certain claims. I called the state of Kansas first over my lunch hour at work, and the database went offline about 30 minutes later. A little bit further in the day, I got a call from a room full of Kansas attorneys that wanted to know, how did I find this, what I had accessed, did I download it, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the last things they said to me was, now, Chris, there's no reason anyone else has to know about this. And when somebody says that to you, that's usually the exact moment that you need to start telling people about it. Then the same day, I left work at about 5 o'clock. Or usually I walk out directly at 5, and my cell phone rang at about 5:04. It was Systema's chief operating officer. Kansas had given him my number. I never contacted him. He contacted me. The COO tried to convince me not to contact any more Systema clients. As you can imagine, they wanted to contain this thing. Over the next day, I notified a few more, being Salt Lake County, and I believe I reached out to California at that time. The COO called me again. He really, really wanted me to not contact any more clients. He said all had been notified by Systema, which I later found out to not be true. I found out that that wasn't true because one of the insurance companies that reported the breach eventually said that they read about it in a news article and Systema never told them about it. So apparently Systema had not told all of the affected entities. A week later, I had still not seen a single breach notification from Systema or any of their clients. Nothing on social media, nothing officially announced on any of the sites that I know where government people archive breach notifications. I hadn't seen anything. So my next step, when I wanted this to come out and for people to be aware that over 1.5 million people had had their information exposed, my next step was emailing details of the breach to online news sites. A few hours after I started doing that, the Texas Attorney General's office called me. They knew that I had been contacting media outlets. I don't know how they knew, but they knew. So the AG's office wanted my hard drive immediately. They issued what's known as a civil investigative demand for the data. Usually you get 2 weeks or so, or I think it's 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, to respond to a civil investigative demand. They gave me 1 day. I didn't challenge it or anything because I had no reason to. The following evening, I spent an hour and a half meeting with the AG's office, handing over the hard drive and negotiating an affidavit saying, no, I didn't make any extra copies of this. I didn't give any full backup copies to anyone else, et cetera, et cetera. The Kansas attorneys had wanted to fly down for this interview, but the Texas Attorney General's office told them to hold off. I'm kind of glad it went down like that because things would have been a little more tense, I think. In the future, I issued a Public Information Act request to get some more info on the communications between Kansas and Texas, but Texas responded by saying that the AG's office anticipates litigation against Systema, so they denied my request. But at least, hey, that tells us something. Now, something I want to point out right here for any security researchers that may be in the audience, if you do find something that affects like government agencies and a company was supposed to be keeping this secret and they forgot to put a password on their database or leaked it in another way, theoretically there's, and I'm not an attorney here, but there is a law where you can sue the company that leaked it because you have original knowledge of the leak. If they were in violation of their contract with the government, meaning if they had signed a contract saying, yes, we will keep this confidential and we're using encryption, and it turns out they were not, you can sue and the government can join in on that suit. And if there are any funds recovered, you can get about 18% of it. It's called a Qui Tam lawsuit. So somebody had suggested that I look into this with the Systema situation, especially because California has such a strong False Claims Act. I did consult with a firm and explored the idea, but ultimately it was decided that it would be prohibitively difficult to prove the adequate timeline, meaning we would have to prove that the database was vulnerable during the time that a contract was signed saying we're going to keep this, Systema is going to keep this secret and encrypted when they were not. We just didn't have the elements to pursue that. Here's my legal theory behind what I do. And again, I'm not an attorney. Don't go to jail over what I say here, but here's how I operate. In my head, country roads are public roads, even if they're not often traveled. If a company were to place sensitive documents on the side of a country road, there's a chance that no one will drive by and see it, and in most cases, nobody does drive by. However, I make a habit of driving down the internet's country roads, and it turns out lots of companies put sensitive documents on the roadside. One of the legal cases that fortifies my feelings of this nature is a Travelers Indemnity Company versus Portal Healthcare, which was decided in 2014, although it was also upheld by the Fourth Circuit earlier this year. This is not binding on Texas, where I live, but I like it, and it is, up in the U.S. judicial system, and I like to, refer to it. In this finding, the judge said that exposing confidential medical records to online searching is publication, and publication does not hinge on the would-be publisher's intent. The district judge, Gerald Bruce Lee, went further to say that publication occurs merely when information is placed before the public, not necessarily when somebody reads it. So by me finding these databases, I'm not causing the breach. The breach has already occurred. The breach occurred the moment the data was put in a publicly accessible area. So my access of it is not necessarily in and of itself a breach or the original breach. The breach is putting it in a publicly accessible area. The judge put it this way. If a book is placed on the shelves in Barnes & Noble, how can you say it's not published until a customer takes the book off the shelf and reads it? Obviously, it's published when it's put on the shelf. The act of publishing has nothing to do with whether anybody takes it off the shelf and reads it. After Systema, things began to heat up. I began using Shodan.io and Zoomai.org to look around, see what's available, just open and publicly on the internet. I learned that lots of NoSQL implementations can be configured for public access with all forms of authentication disabled. Examples are MongoDB, Cassandra, CouchDB, etc. Statistically, I think this is a data breach storm waiting to happen, and it has proven to be one. Because if you can configure something to have no security or authentication, then statistically some percentage of the population is going to do that. Here's a breach that I found following after that time. It had to do with iFit. It's a Fitbit competitor. They had over 500,000 user profiles exposed, things like names, email addresses, password hashes, and some medical data like height, weight, heart rate tracking logs, workout times, and such. At first, they claimed it was a several-year-old test database, but later they admitted it's a database in a test environment, but with real data. And in my opinion, that doesn't make it any better. I don't care if it's a test database. If you put real data in it, it might as well be a real server, a real database, a production database, because it's got production data in it. I don't think that iFit is bound by HIPAA because I don't think we've gone through in this country, we've gone through the legal proceedings to clarify whether Fitbit and iFit and other companies like that are covered entities. So I don't know how their notifications or if notifications went out or whatever. Hzone. This is a breach that I found that had to do with a dating app for HIV-positive adults. There were nearly 5,000 users exposed, things like GPS coordinates, sexual preferences, private messages between users. I worked with the admin at databreaches.net to contact Hzone's owners. Eventually, the Hzone CEO threatened to infect the databreaches.net administrator with HIV. I'm not sure what part of this made him so angry, whether it was the reporting or the finding or what, but that's just an absolutely ridiculous incident response. OkHello is a defunct phone app that allowed people to, video chat together and have little rooms and such. I found over 2.6 million user accounts, email addresses, password hashes, private messages, stuff like that, in an unprotected MongoDB. There was also a zip backup file of the database being hosted on a regular web page. Just you punched in the IP address and boom, it was right there for download, just one link right to it. I couldn't believe this. So after trying to contact OkHello and getting nowhere, there was some media coverage about this. OkHello finally took it down, took down the database and their own website about 2 weeks later. Here's one that went a little bit viral. It was the Hello Kitty breach. I found 3.3 million Hello Kitty fan accounts exposed. It was another one where it was difficult to find the proper contact people to get this taken down. Hello Kitty is a huge corporation, and getting anywhere with their customer service folks when you're claiming they have a data breach is just fruitless. So eventually I decided to work on some sort of warning to users while the database was still exposed, but it was not an easy one to find, so I didn't feel bad about that. So that people would know, hey, if you're reusing your password with Hello Kitty accounts, the Sanrio websites, Sanrio is the company that owns Hello Kitty, then if you're reusing those passwords, you might want to change them on other sites. The article was first posted at CSO Online by Steve Reagan. It went viral very quickly. I got an email from a Sanrio Town executive 3 days later. He wished that I had brought the breach to Sanrio Town's attention before publishing, which I did try to do. He didn't suggest any better way that I could have tried to do that. He just said he wished, I guess maybe it's just regret he was expressing and not really telling me to do it any differently, but, maybe I don't know how else I could have done that. Here's a school situation in California. There's a series of K-12 charter schools called the California Virtual Academies. I found in a completely unprotected database 59,000 student records, things like grades, special education status, therapy notes if they do have special education statuses, dates of birth, names, things like that of students. There were also 17,000 employee payroll files, things with social security numbers, email addresses, pay rates, and mysteriously there were plain text passwords right next to the hashed passwords, which makes absolutely no sense at all why you would store plain text passwords next to their hashed version. It just makes no sense at all to me. Recently, I was contacted by their attorney to verify that all the data was securely wiped. That's something that I don't often see. There was a good follow-up, and they made sure that it was protected as far as my side goes, so good for them. Here's the Council on American Islamic Relations breach that I was talking about. The third party that I mentioned earlier is Virtue Center. They are a group that specifically handles like donation data for nonprofits. And on Virtue Center's site, it says they have safe and secure payment. Their donation platform is 100% secure and fully integrated into the site. No redirection to PayPal or other third-party sites. So you can rest at ease about the safety of your contribution. That's completely backwards. You do not want to see that on somebody's website. You want them to redirect through PayPal or another trusted company. A reason why is that when Virtue Center, when I discovered their database online that was exposed, unprotected, no password or anything, there were thousands of donor credit card details. Things like the person's name, their credit card number, the CVV code, their address, everything a fraudster would need to take advantage of these people donating to this Islamic nonprofit. Virtue Center, I got 1 or 2 emails from them, and then they vanished. Completely took down their website, took down the database. I could never get any further response from them. CARE also, they didn't vanish, but they stayed silent on the issue. I mean, I don't blame them for that. It wasn't their specific database. They weren't hosting it themselves, I don't think. So you know, they left it up to Virtue Center, I'm pretty sure, to handle the response to this. But CARE did not specifically respond to me directly. Here's another health-related one. The Alliance Health Network, they operate a series of condition-specific medical support communities, things for people with diabetes, arthritis, depression, stuff like that. It appears that records of people signing up that had defects in them, like you didn't put in enough numbers in your phone number, or the database or the date of birth indicated that you were a minor. Those records were not just automatically thrown out, it appears. It looked like they were placed in a database table called Scrubbed Leads. The Scrubbed Leads table had accumulated over 1.5 million records with names, phone numbers, dates of birth, email addresses, insurance carrier information, and medical condition notes. Alliance Health responded quickly, and they were proactive about things after I notified them. They're complying with all notification laws as far as I know. They put up a little banner on their site. So again, applause for them. Not applause that it happened, but applause for the way they've handled it since then. They're another one that got back to me recently, making sure that I had securely deleted anything that I had downloaded. So good for them. Here's one that made a resurgence several months after I notified them of their database exposure. Beautifulpeople.com. It's a dating site where you get voted in. You get a trial membership, and if you're not hot, you are rejected by the members. I found 1.2 million user accounts and many, many millions of private messages, hash passwords, sexual orientation, username, all that. Their PR team responded by calling it a possible issue and an alleged breach in an email to me. They later called the database a staging server and downplayed the issue as it was not a production server. That's just PR mumbo jumbo. Again, a test database with real data might as well be a production database. There's no difference between the data in a production and a staging server with production. So don't listen to their legal, or not legal, their PR mumbo jumbo. It was serious. Here's one that didn't get much coverage, and it was related to the American Association of Retired Persons, which is now known just as AARP. They had 1.4 million accounts of people registered through their Life Reimagined portal with names, email addresses, password hashes, and other bits of personal information. They had it all sitting in an unprotected MongoDB. When I notified them, they ignored me. I waited a week. I went to the media. I said, okay, these guys are ignoring me. They're not doing anything. This is AARP. They should get their act together. And an article was posted on securityweek.com that mentioned the information I'd sent out. I was contacted by an AARP security group the same day the article went up. To my knowledge, no breach notification went out to users, and they never commented publicly. Although later I was contacted anonymously via Reddit by a supposed insider at AARP that was urging me to make a bigger deal out of the breach. The insider alleged that AARP had conspired to cover up this breach, or at least were actively not wanting it to get out. Here's the big one that made the most headlines, at least in the United States, the U.S. voter registration database. In many jurisdictions in the U.S., it's considered public info, but there are a lot of exceptions to that. There's at least one state where you can't even put it online. In California, it's pretty restrictive. You have to have a legitimate reason to have this data. I saw an interview with the man that's responsible for the voter registration data here in Austin, Texas, and he said that his agency does not give out the dates of birth. However, the database that I found had all the dates of birth, so something isn't lining up here. To this day, the exact faulty party is not known for sure. However, we have a prime suspect. I believe that it was Pioneer Solutions Incorporated. Don't get that confused with regular Pioneer Solutions, but Pioneer Solutions Incorporated and United in Purpose. They're headed by the same guy, a felon named Bill Dallas. He's an ex-San Quentin inmate convicted of embezzlement in the 90s. And interestingly enough, United in Purpose paid Pioneer Solutions over $1.2 million in 2012 and 2013 for Pioneer data. This is the big money one that I mentioned earlier. 3lockbox.com is an escrow service. They had an exposed database indicating over $3.5 million in dispersible funds in dozens of accounts. There were plain text passwords for about half of the accounts. I believe the reason behind that was from the field names. I'm guessing that there was originally hashing, but if somebody changed their password, the new password wasn't hashed. There was just a field for like new passwords, something of that nature, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Upon notification, the 3Lockbox admin requested a week before I report anything to the media. There was a minor misunderstanding there. He thought that I had agreed to a week before they secure the database. I meant a week before I tell anybody about it, not just to secure it. When you've got $3.5 million sitting in an account, or not in an account, but in a database that can be messed with, I expect it to be secured immediately. So I woke up late or early on Christmas morning and just on a whim checked to see if the database had been secured yet. It had not. It was at 2 a.m. Christmas morning. I called the CEO of 3Lockbox to tell him that this database was still unsecured. Guess how I found his home phone number? Through the voter registration database. So I'm compounding databases here to do notifications. I'm skilled like that. What can I say? It was secured about an hour later by 3 a.m. Christmas morning. Now, I want to be clear that the CEO did not believe that any money could be stolen through that, because no money directly moves through the website. But when you have your administrative credentials exposed and you have all of the paper filings that are necessary to move money around, and you have accounts of all your users and that much money is involved, I think somebody with more skills than myself might have been able to figure out a way to scam that money, or at least a percentage of it. This one was one of the more recent databases that I found, the Mexican voter database. There were 93 million records in it, although the Electoral Authority of Mexico claims there were only 87 million unique records, which is still a very large amount. Under Mexican law, these records are strictly confidential, as opposed to in America or the U.S., where our voter registration files are not strictly confidential. They actually get quite outraged when these get leaked in Mexico. It was hosted on a cloud server in the United States, which again is curious because there are penalties for transferring this data outside of Mexico. So the fact that somebody transferred it to a U.S. server is questionable in and of itself. It turned out to be the responsibility of the server, turned out to be the responsibility of the Citizens Movement Party. Their spokesman immediately claimed that they were hacked. However, Amazon came out on my side and stated that there was no hack at all and the data was stored insecurely. This precipitated changes in the Mexican electoral policy. They've drastically limited the amount of data that they share with political parties, and they now have a policy in place where if somebody wants to review the voter database and has a right to, like one of the political parties, they have to come to specific centers. I believe one's in Mexico City and there's one in another satellite city. And in this center, this building, you can't bring in a cell phone, you can't print from the computers that you query from, and you're not allowed to take any pictures either. So it's on lockdown now. I'm very glad to see that. This one is an example of one that went badly. uKnowKids is a child tracking application. They have like a phone app, they have a website portal, and you can keep track of the pictures your kids are taking and where your kids are, who they're talking to, what the text messages they're sending, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously a breach of a database like that is pretty bad. The one that I found was an unprotected MongoDB. It was exposing over 1,700 children's accounts with 6.8 million text messages and over 2 million images. The uKnowKids CEO, when I notified him, quickly went from appreciative to intimidating to accusatory. He even posted this, what's pictured in that image, to the blog at uKnowKids.com. Breaking news, a database was breached by a hacker, and here are the facts as we know them right now, and it went on to lambast me. This was the fallout from that incident. Lots of articles being posted around the internet saying, uKnowKids reacts to data breach in the worst possible way. Child tracker in hack row. uKnowKids goes on attack after database of 1,700 kids found insecure, etc. Now, here's a few thoughts about the uKnowKids response. Steve Woda, who is the uKnowKids CEO, even called my boss in an apparent attempt to endanger my employment. Now that goes a little far, don't you think? Also, think about libel. To publish an untruth about somebody else that will do harm to that person or his or her reputation is libel, which is a tortious action here in the United States. Publishing a claim of somebody committing a crime when you know that they have not is well established as libel. Steve Woda, by his own account, is a computer and internet security professional. He knows what hacking is and what it is not. I believe he knows that I did not hack his server. Yet, in his published statements, Woda claims that I commit criminal hacking acts. He said that I try to obtain unauthorized access into private systems. That's a direct quote. It said he tries to obtain unauthorized access into private systems. Now, under the law in America, doing so is a crime. So he has directly accused me of a criminal act that he knows I did not commit. That's a dangerous thing for a CEO to do. And here are some more thoughts about that. I've assisted with investigations conducted by the FBI, the Texas Attorney General's Office, the Secret Service, the state of Kansas, the California Highway Patrol, etc. Not a single agency amongst them has even suggested that what I do is criminal. Here's the alternative if you want to go with Steve Woda's thinking of I shouldn't be doing this. Well, here's an example of one that I discovered in December 9th, 2015 specifically. It belonged to Battlefy.com, had around 89,000 usernames, email addresses, and passwords. When I found it, I added it to my backlog of breaches to notify. Of course, this was a gaming site. It didn't have social security numbers. It didn't have health insurance information. So I put it on the back burner. I didn't give it a high priority. However, by January 11th, when I still hadn't notified them yet that I had found it, somebody else apparently had found it because this article hit the internet. Hackers hit esports site Battlefy and release users' data. Apparently, somebody else found the same database and had released it to the public in a, I guess, malicious way. I don't know the full story of how they released it, but it certainly wasn't a good thing to happen to that database. So which one would you rather have? Me doing this and responsibly letting people know and not handing it out to the world, or hackers or people that claim to be hackers finding it and releasing it to the world? I think it's a clear choice. So here are some tips that I have. For consumers, be wary of any company that claims to be more secure than an industry standard, because if they are, then they would be the industry standard. This goes back to the Virtue Center breach that I found, where Virtue Center was claiming that their technique was more secure than using PayPal or another third party to handle your credit card donor information. If you have such a good way to do it, chances are you would be the standard. So don't say your way is better than the standard unless you're on the track to take over as the standard. Also, here's a unnatural one that gets thrown around a lot. Don't reuse passwords. But my twist on this is more practical. If you have to reuse passwords, and a lot of people think they do because they just can't remember them, they just can't remember enough passwords, use the tiered approach. That's something I describe as remember as many passwords as you can, but let's say you honestly can't remember more than 3 passwords. Use one of those passwords for things like social media that you don't care about, not Facebook or Twitter. Those are a little more important, but I'm talking little things like commenting on news sites, things like that. Use one as just a throwaway password. Use a second one for actually logging into Facebook, for logging into your email, for logging into things that matter a little bit and would have an impact on you. And use the third one for banking and secure transactions with the government, things of that nature. That's only if you absolutely have to reuse them. Reusing is a bad approach, but if you use the tiered approach to reusing them, then when somebody hacks one of those minor news sites, they won't also have your password to your banking account. Treat your email password as sensitively as a banking password. The reason behind this is people don't think about this, but when you reset a password, a lot of the times your email account gets involved in that process. Many companies are now using two-factor authentication to reset passwords, which is good. But historically, if somebody has your email account, they can reset all sorts of passwords and have those passwords reset links sent to that email account. So it's kind of a skeleton key of sorts. And people don't realize how important their email address is. A lot of people think, if somebody sends out email as me, it won't be that bad, but it's more important than you think. For some tips for developers, stop hashing with MD5. I see it way too much. It's obsolete. It's old. It's a standard from 93, something like that. Just stop using it. Use bcrypt. Use something more recent than MD5. There's no excuse anymore. Implement a data retention limitation policy. Logs are a liability. I know a lot of people think that the more data they can gather, the more they can sell eventually and make money off of and monetize. But when there's a breach, the more data that you have makes the breach worse and worse. So follow retention laws, but when it's possible, aggregate what you need and purge the rest. the potential money you're going to make when you want to sell all this data is just it's pie in the sky. The risk versus reward is not there. Also, a tip that I tell oftentimes when somebody asks me, okay, how can we stop somebody like you from finding databases? Well, consider assigning a staff member the duty of periodically attempting to reach your critical servers and services from their home with no authentication or credentials at all. Just send them home early one day, say, okay, you're going to try to connect all of our important stuff with no special authentication. That's essentially what going to a white hat hacking group would do for you, except it's a little more informal, and everybody can afford to do this. That alone would stop 90 to 95% of the breaches that I find. I believe that's the end of the presentation. What do we want to do now, Jeremiah? Are we going to take questions or something?
Yeah, sure. We can do questions. Either type the questions in the question box. Let's see. We see there we have some. Let me check just a moment here and see if we can open up the audio. Okay. Yeah, there's a question option there. If anybody wants to ask any questions there, in that would be really useful, and we can go ahead and try to answer them now. If anyone has any more in-depth questions that they'd like to ask Chris, you can message him at cvickery@crumtech.com, and that way we can piece together a real thorough answer for you. Oh, are you still with me, Chris? Hold on.
Okay, I think I'm here now. I was muted for a minute.
Okay, not a problem. And let's see here what questions we have. Oh, looks like just some common lost audio. Here we are.
Okay, I want to give everybody an update on the TOPS situation. Unfortunately, it appears nobody was able to reach TOPS during my talk and get them to secure this database. I'm looking at it on a second computer here. It's still vulnerable to being accessed publicly. So I guess I will look into some more TOPS email addresses and phone numbers and try contacting them again this week.
Okay, great. It looks like, I don't see any questions coming through here. So if anyone has any additional questions, like I said, feel free to email Chris, cvickery@crumtech.com, and we'll give it just another minute or so here to see if anybody wants to ask any questions. Let's see.
I can see some people with their hands raised now. There's a Ramesh Reddy.
Okay, I'll send him a chat message. Yeah, no, I don't see. Let's see. Okay, here we have from Brenda D. Can you elaborate a bit more on the Mexican case?
Well, yeah, I guess I can. There's a little bit more to the story. I did end up finding a second Mexican voter registration database that had to do specifically with Sinaloa. That was only 2 million though. Let's see, what else can I say about it? The way that it got secured was a little interesting. I was giving a talk at Harvard back before that made the news, and I had mentioned that I found a database that appeared to have the voter registration data of the country of Mexico. And fortunately, there was a Mexican student in the audience. He was able to authenticate his father's information in the database, so I knew it was real then. And there was a journalist in the audience that was able to get in contact using his Harvard email address with the INE, the Mexican Electoral Authority, and they paid attention to him, obviously, because it came from Harvard, and he put me in contact with them, and I gave them the details of the database, and they got it shut down, a few days later. The INE has invited me down to Mexico. I don't know if that trip is going to happen or not, but that's a pretty cool little response there. I guess what more do you want to know about the Mexican data breach situation?
Let's see. Next question we have here is from Alessandro. Have you ever thought about selling the data you found? And if not, why? And a second question from him is, have you ever received a money deal from a company you've notified about a database problem? I guess that would be kind of, someone paying to not release the information or something like that.
Well, no, I haven't sold the data. No, that would go, against what I believe is the right thing to do. And in some situations that would be illegal, I guess. It would depend on the data as to whether or not that was something that could be bought or sold. I don't think you can specifically sell Social Security numbers, but I mean there are some data brokers that do it. So I don't know what the law on that would be. But no, I haven't received payments from anybody for not reporting a data breach or anything of that nature. Most of the time, it just involves a thank you, and we part ways from there. Microsoft gave me a subscription to their MSDN developer network. That was pretty cool. That's worth a few $100s, I think. I mean, there are little perks here and there, but no straight up, here's a chunk of money.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, if there's any additional questions, once again, in your control panel of the GoToWebinar, there is the question option. So if anybody's still listening, we still do have a few more people would like to ask a question with Chris Vickery. Would be happy to answer it. We'll give that just a few more minutes. And Chris, do you have any really interesting stuff in your backlog now that you're trying to secure?
Yeah, I do actually have some interesting stuff. I found a site that claims to destroy messages between users. It's not a huge one like Snapchat or whatever, but it's got a decent amount of users that actually does not destroy everything that they claim they're destroying. They actually keep the thumbnails, they keep the names of the files, they keep the to and the from and the times and everything. So it's not as secure as they would make people think. That's one interesting breach that I'm working on right now. I found a video game server at one point where you could alter the characters in the video game through the database, I believe. That's one interesting one that gamers may be interested in reading about later on. I've got one that involves the government of Colombia, potentially. I don't want to say too much about that because I still haven't confirmed that it's definitely them, and because it deals in a language that I am not a native speaker of, I don't want to make too many assumptions. But so be on the lookout for those in the future, and there's plenty more in the backlog.
Very cool. Well, it looks like we don't have any additional questions as of right now, but for anyone listening, if you'd like to get in on our mailing list of new data leaks or news, you can just reach out to Chris at cvickery@crumtech.com. We'd like to thank everyone once again for joining us this evening and look forward to speaking with you again soon. Chris, thank you for your time, and would like to thank everyone again for joining us today.